Alright everybody, how y'all doing today? A certain person came to me and asked me about 4 cores and 4 thread processors. She mentioned 2 processors she wants to push it in with the GPU and how much RAM she wants to push it at. The first processor is the A12 9800 CP 9800. Let me correct that, APU, because it's an advanced processing unit that has the GPU built inside. But she's gonna be teaming it with the graphic card, which is the RX 550, 2GB on 32GB of RAM. And the second card is the second her second choice. Excuse me for that. Her second choice is the Ryzen 3 1200 on the GTX 1050 Ti, which that is a 4GB GPU with 32GB of RAM. So I also asked her, what are you planning on doing with the 4-core 4-thread processors on both of them, with the A12 9800 and the Ryzen 3 1200? She just only said that she wants to play her best 9 top 10 games, which are Mortal Kombat X, Minecraft, Fortnite, Gang Beast, Friday the 13th, Inside, Sims 3, Call of Duty Warzone, and Brawlhalla. Those are her only games she likes to play. She has a PS4 system as well, but the only thing she play on it is Fortnite. That's it. So she came to me and asked which processor is good. I told her, well, since you want to play video games only on that, I say both of them are good. Now, I also let her know that when you sit down here picking the 4-core 4-thread processor and with those type GPUs, use the recommended sites that I use to go ahead on and figure out which games are compatible with them GPUs and the processor as well in system performance. Now, before we get started with all that good information I listed, we're going to go ahead on and get into the CPUs. Now, with that said, the A12 9800, I was on this processor because I had brought the Asus Prime A32MK motherboard, and I needed this processor to upgrade it. I use this processor for basically for medium task development, between 4 to about 6% of what I needed to do with my editing videos and stuff for YouTube. It did great. Now with this processor, I used it, and I use the GPU as well. I'm on the RX 550. You can only, with the RX 550, you can only put your videos in 1080p format, 24 to 25 frames per second. Why? Because of the 2GB VRAM. Now, if you have a 6GB or more, you can go ahead and put them in 60 frames per second, and you can also put them in 4K 1440p compatibility. But I enjoy my 1080p and etc. And that's one thing I wanted her to understand. If you play your games at 1080p, both these processors and GPUs are good for you. You just need to know what is the system requirements to push your games on these processors. Now, with the A12 9800, it is frequency is at 3800 megahertz, which is 3.8. Her boost frequency is at 4.2 megahertz. Now, when it came out, it was $99. The introduction date was 2016 on September 5. So that makes this about a 5-year-old processor. Now, scalpers are pushing these processors as high as $199. The exact cost of the Ryzen 5 3600 and the high cost of the Ryzen 9 3950X. Now, it is a Bristol Ridge. It is data width is 64-bit. It is number of cores is 4 cores, number of threads 4. So it's a 4-core, 4-thread processor. You got level 2 cache size is 2 by 1 megabyte 16-way set. Associative shared cache. Level 3 cache size none. It's a multi-processor. And as you see, all your yada yada yada, all your extensions and technologies that's in it. Now, with this A12 9800, it is a APU, Advanced Processing Unit. It has the GPU of Radeon 7 series. Now you can operate supported memory for this is DDR4 2400, but I also heard that you could operate this on 3200 megahertz speed. Now, the thermal design power that you can't go wrong with it is 65 watts, so it don't get overheated as your advanced processors that are out now. Now, moving right along to the Ryzen 3 1200 CPU. Alrighty, the Ryzen 3 is at 3.1 megahertz base. The Ryzen A12 9800 is at 3.8, so you get 7.7 more base frequency more than the Ryzen 3 1200. It is boost is at 3.4. It came out in July 27, 2017, so I make this processor 4 years old, and a lot of people still use it. It came out at $109. It is a 4-core, 4-thread processor, as long as the A12 9800. It is a Summit-rich processor core. You got all your extensions and technologies. Now, when it comes to integrated graphics, you get none. And if you're going to buy this processor, you have to buy integrated graphics. Now, with the shortage of GPUs that is going on right now due to COVID-19, and companies had to downsize their staff. So this is why we're having a hard time getting the latest GPUs. And all the old GPUs, sellers had to go up on the price just to hold them a little longer until they get another stock coming in, and the price goes back down to normal. Now you got your scalpers that just going ridiculous with it. I had saw on PC Part Picker, one seller was selling. I'm gonna show you the calculator. I still have this card. One seller was selling this card, the MSI GeForce 210, for $1,500. Now you can game up the GeForce 210. About 14 games can handle that card only. So I advise y'all not to go ahead and throw no heavy esport games at it, or no heavy AAA high demanding games that has a lot of rendering in the CG. Now, number of controller is 2. Now keep in mind, both thermal design power is at 65 watts, which that is good, so you ain't gotta worry about this processor overheating. The processor has an unlocked clock multiplier. Box processor is packaged with the rate step fan cooler and heat sink. Now, if you're going to use it at normal settings, like I use my processors, and if I need that extra boost, I allow the system to overclock it itself. So I ain't throwing no heavy power at it, so I'm not overclocking it. But to the ones who likes to overclock their parts, you're going to need a heavier heatsink fan to hold that heat, to push all the heat down and keep the CPU at its performance. Now, we're going to go right along into the graph and charts and the reviews and stuff. Now, the AMD A12 9800 advantages. This microprocessor has a higher operating frequency than the AMD 1200 processor. The microprocessor incorporates XOP instructions introduced in the recent past. Even though these extensions are not widely used in programs yet, their supports should improve in the future apps. The AMD A1200 includes the FMA4 instruction set extensions. Only AMD CPUs have this technology, thus it probably will not get board support from software vendors. So keep that in mind. The process features integrated Ryzen R7 series GPU. This graphic unit can be used for casual gaming and 3D applications. Notice it says used for casual gaming and 3D applications. So if you want to use the AMD APU A12 9800 onboard graphics and play casual gaming, that means don't throw nothing heavy at it like certain people did. And as you know, the Ryzen R7 got bad reviews and bad results. You can only play casual games and only use 3D applications for the certain 3D applications, not heavy 3D applications like Cinebench 20 Plus or Heaven Benchmark, etc. 3D Mark, etc. Higher benchmarkings that are used for higher and extreme graphic cards. Now, the AMD 1200 advantages: the microprocessor is not locked. To get greater performance from the processor, it can be overclocked with ease. Be aware that overclocking voids the warranty of the CPU. Now, a lot of people didn't know what they was doing, burned out the CPU and trying to get their money back or trying to get a refund. When stores gave it to their tech and they noticed that the card was overclocked, and then they noticed it was overclocked because it leaves a certain dark and burn mark on the CPU. So keep that in mind. If you're going to overclock the CPU, it's going to go ahead and it kills the warranty. Now, the microprocessor has 11% higher memory bandwidth, owing the faster support DDR4 2666 memory. Higher memory bandwidth is very beneficial to tasks dealing with larger data sets. It also improves performance at some degree in non-memory bounded applications. Now we see why a lot of people like the Ryzen 3 1200, because you could go ahead and push on DDR4 2666 megahertz or higher, or 32. With the A12, it starts off at 24 megahertz. Some say you could push 32 megahertz off of it, but I'm going to find that information out and I'm going to give that to you. Now, here is the comparisons between the A12 9800 versus the Ryzen 3 1200. Now, both of them has 4 cores, 4 threads. That's a big plus. Operating frequency. Now, we know that the A12 9800 has base is 3.8 megahertz and their boost is 4.2 megahertz. With the Ryzen 3 1200, the base is at 3.1 with the boost of 3.4. But here's where things get interesting: that on chip L2 and L3 catch, the A12 has a 2 megabyte as the Ryzen 12 has a 10 megabyte. So yes, you get a little better performance in throwing loads at the Ryzen 3 1200 where you can overclock it. Now, both of the chipsets are at 65 watt thermal design power. If you plan on using it at its regular CPU and APU performance, you can go ahead and put a CPU cooler no higher than 130 watts of CPU handling. Just in case, if you want to change it out to a more higher processor with the thermal design power, I'm pushing to 195 watts to 105 watts. This is one reason why I always tell everybody, if you're going to use an air cooler, always go a little higher if you plan on upgrading down in the future. Now, enough with that said. She said, "Oh, but what GPU can I use to play my games at without the bottlenecking and frames per second freezing at 1080p?" I told her you can go ahead and play a lot of good games at 1080p. And the main thing because I'm on the 4-core, 4-thread processor with the A10 5800K, and I'm on the GeForce GTX 1063 gigabyte GPU card, and it plays my 1080 games at its best performance. And of course, I go ahead and got the Thermaltake Contact 12 on it, which it pushes handleage of that CPU air cooler is 150 watts in thermal design power of handleage from the CPU. So yes, everything stayed cool. But how I noticed to play some of these games on that system I just mentioned is game debate. Yes, without this here page, I would have been up shit creek. Everything been bottlenecking, and I probably slung that PC out the window. But this website really helped me out a lot in figuring out all the games that I could play at 1080p. I know some of y'all play y'all games at 4K, at 1440. Some of y'all on party with all the new gear coming out. Y'all were just switching them like cooking pancakes. Fast as they come out the grill, a new set in. So that's how y'all was. But see me, I'm old school. I like keeping things at my base performance. And when this person told me what they wanted to play and what games they wanted to play, I'm sticking it on her base performance. This is why I mentioned those two processors. Yes, they're still good. You could go ahead and do a lot with 4K, 4-thread, but it all depends on your GPU and your CPU. So you can't throw a lot of workload at it. Now, I say a lot of people got the A12 and start doing ridiculous things with it. They was making videos, streaming games, streaming live play, just doing everything that you should not do with a 4-core, 4-thread processor because of the workload it handles. Now, if it was a 4-core, 8-thread, that's a different story. Just as a 6-core, 12 threads, as an 8-core, 16 threads, the higher, as you know, the higher I'm going up with it, the higher I know the performance of how it's handling, and the higher I'm increasing the threads and the cores is because of the workload a lot of people do with their PCs. Now, we know everything is going up because with the COVID-19, a lot of people got laid off. In the U.S. alone, it was about 60 million people that got laid off. You can look those numbers up by typing in, asking Google, how many people got laid off during the COVID-19. When I put it in, it pushes at 60 million. Exactly. So everybody said, hey, I got to do something. Now, I was watching one creator, and they told him, get a real job. Now, to the dumb ass that said that, how can you get a real job when companies not hiring like they were? And the people that's on furlough, still on furlough, and they can't get their jobs back. So, what can you do? Become a creator. Produce and make your own videos for people on YouTube to watch. It's like I'm doing. Now, back to the system. Now, the person also mentioned that she wanted to play games at 1080p with the specs that she gave me, and what games could run off of it. We're going to go ahead on and do one. I'm going to go ahead and do her favorite game, Fortnite. Once you go ahead and put that information in, and you can see, now, you see the game come up, Fortnite. You're going to click on System Requirement 2. Now, I'm going to do on 2. I'm going to do it with the Ryzen 3 1200, and I'm going to do it with the A12 9800. First one's up is the A12 9800, and voila, 4 cores at 3.8 gigahertz. Her GPU will be the RX 550, 2 gigabyte. And voila, you click next. I know some of y'all probably know about this site, some of y'all probably not know about this site. Now, the best place, I'm gonna tell you, it has a list at 8 gigabytes. You can push certain games off 8 gigabytes, but the best is to start your game off at 16 gigabytes. Now, knowing her, she want to push it at its memory performance, and the board she using, the max memory is 32 gigabyte of RAM. So we're gonna go to 32 gigabyte. Now we're gonna click check specs. Alrighty, her APU A12 9800 gets a check. It's in the green. Her graphics gets a check. It's a 2 gigabyte. And you know her memory is at 1.4. That means that you can play 144 total playable games with this card. And you have no issues with the APU. Now you can go ahead and create your login information. If you want to go ahead and record any information and put it on the site, you could do that, but it's already been recorded. So using this APU as you see, it's lit up at recommended requirements. It handles at 103%. Now that's this red line here, you see right here, that's your gaming line. If it passes that, that means it can handle it at 1080p with not an issue. That means 1920 by 1080. GPU is at 129%, and you know her RAM is drop killer at 400%. So she got no issues. Now the last time it was tested with this game was tested on the i5 760, 2.8 gigahertz, and it was tested on the AMD FX 8100. The graphics was the GeForce GTX 660 and the AMD Radeon HD 7870, and it was also tested on, whoever did the last information did it on 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now we already know that 8 gigabyte was good, but if you want better performance, it's best to go 16 gigabytes or higher. So now you're moving right on down. It's projected frames per second analyst. This red line is your game line. As you see, at low setting is high, at medium is at medium. Everything's over the game line. Ultra is over the game line. So if it goes over the game line, your game is compatible. Your components are compatible to play the game. Now I did click minimum requirements. Now I'm gonna click them on the minimum requirements. As you see, GPU is at 150. The CPU is at 150. The GPU in the minimum is a whopping 1400%, and the RAM is at 800%. Now I use this website to test all latest games. Now I am on the RX 550 myself. Just like I mentioned earlier, I can only throw so much at that card because it is a 2 gig. It only gives me 2 gigabyte of VRAM. I am looking forward to increase. I hope I could get the 3060 because I do a lot and I want to put all my content at 60 frames per second. Yes, the 3060 12 gigabyte card. That's what I'm looking for. I hope, fingers crossed, that I could get one. But if not, I'm looking for the RTX 2060 or the 2060 Super. If I could get one on hand, why? I'm sticking with that because my PSU is at 600 watts, and I'm not swapping out my PSU with any higher card like the 3080 or the 2080. Those cards require you to push it at 700 to 800 watts required on your PSU, so I'm good. Now, if you want to go to game debate, adjust the requirements. Once again, it's at 109. GPU is at 193, and the RAM is overkill at 800% because she wanted to go ahead and max the RAM out so she ain't got to be upgrading her RAM later on down the line. So this is one reason why I do the PC power picker. When I look at the board, I see what is the max requirement of RAM I could put in it. Some people put at 16. Some people get the 4 slots. They want to upgrade. 32 gigabyte is good enough for me. And she said it was good enough for her. A lot of people say 16 gigabyte of RAM is good enough for them. It all depends on what you want your system and how fast you want your system to push, which is great. Now, a lot of people still looking at what games they can still play with these low-end cards, because that's what a lot of people buying now are the low-end graphic cards, the 2 gigabyte, the 4 gigabyte, because you cannot get the 6 gigabyte or higher because they're all sold out. So now, if we keep going at this rate, we might not have no computer parts to buy at all. I hope that day don't come. So now, another good website I like to use is System Requirements Lab. And here is the GPU compare charts. Now, on the other one, I'm going to talk about both the RX 550 and the GTX 1050 Ti. Now, here's the manufacturer is AMD. Generation is 4th generation old. That means that this card came out in 2017. Category is just a performance card. You know, you're just going to get what you get from it. Dedicated RAM is at 2 gigabytes. DirectX 12. Rank percentile is at 88 percentile of AMD GPUs. Rank and power is at 57th of AMD GPUs. Keep in mind that the RX 550 do not require you to use a power supply hookup with the PCIe hookup. And the rank and popularity is at 8 of AMD GPUs, because when these GPUs came out, people said, oh, you could game off of it. Yes, and thanks to Steve from Tech Deals, because he put me onto this card when I couldn't get me a GeForce 2060 Super, because the prices was equivalent. You know, I was watching as the prices was going up, so I settled with this. And to keep in mind, I'm gonna be real with you, this card have not let me down. It has shocked me. It amazed me. Even though I cannot put my content at 60 frames per second, but for 24 to 25 frames per second at what it can handle and what it can do off of my Ryzen 5 3600, 16 gigabyte of RAM, I can't ask no more. So now, but when I go ahead on the if I got my fingers crossed, if I could get the RTX 2060 Super or the RTX 3060 12 gigabyte, because as being the creator, my page is growing, and I'm beginning to do more. I'm beginning to put out about like 3-4 videos about a week. I want to go ahead and increase that to 5 to 6 videos a week. So that's why I want those cards, because my increase load is coming a little heavier now. But for the person who she came to me and said she just want to play her 1080p games, that's it. This card works good for her as well too. And as you see, if you go down to the thing, to see with the check, you see the minimum and requirements. You see a green check, that means it plays it in both settings. When you see this here, it do not handle that game too well. You will be bottlenecking the CPU, which some of y'all threw the high demand is sports and AAA games at this card, and you belittled this card, made a lot of people not buy it. This is one reason why it says you could go ahead and play casual games with this card. Now, with the RX, you see the green. If you get a green check, that means you can push this game at 1080p, 1920 by 1080 in ultra or max settings. If we get this here, like my homeboy said, why don't you go ahead and play Red Dead Redemption 2 off of it? Right on RX 50. As you see, I cannot put in a minimum nor recommended because this game is not compatible with that card. When Red Redemption came out, it came out for the 2080 series graphic cards or higher. Now, if I had the 3060 Ti or the 3070 or the 3060 12GB or the 3080 10GB, yes, I can play that now because that game is compatible with those cards with the high end frame per second rates on the CG that it pushes constantly. Now, she also plays Minecraft. It's compatible with both the minimum and recommended settings. She don't like Apex Legends, so if you do play Apex Legends, keep in mind you have to play it in minimum settings with this card. League of Legends, same thing. I will be putting the information in the description below so you can go check out what games that y'all can play with these low end graphic cards, the 2GB and the 4GB, so y'all know. Now on the right is the RX 6900 XT, and as you see, once you go down the line, everything checked in green because that graphic card can handle the games that came out way before the car hit the retail stores. But last but not least, she was also talking about the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. If she decided to go to Ryzen 3 1200, same specs of RAM, 32GB, she wants her PC to run as smooth as possible. Once again, manufacturers NVIDIA, three generations old, so that makes this card about 2018 when this card came out. It's a high performance card. It's at 4GB of VRAM. DirectX 12. Rank is 88%. Rank and power is 57%, so that means that you do not need a power connector from the PCIe cable. So it runs without no PCIe cable, and it ranks 2 in popularity, as well as you see, same thing, 88%, 57, but the popularity goes to 8. That means you can you can run 67% of these games at recommended or best experience levels of the Radeon RX 550, and with the GTX 1050 Ti, you can run 77% of games at recommended or best experience settings. It will run 94% of your games of all top 9,000 PC games. Now, with that said, I can compare. See, as you see, what I did was I compared the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti or the Radeon RX 550 and Grand Theft Auto. Perfect. Cyberpunk. You can run Cyberpunk or GeForce GTX 1050 Ti at minimum. For the Radeon RX, everybody threw Cyberpunk 2077 at it, and it failed. See, because there you go. Call of Duty Warzone, you can play both of them at minimum settings. Valorant, you can play Valorant perfectly and recommend or minimum. Or if you do a Radeon RX 550 2GB, you can play it on there at minimums. So just like I said, with the green check, that means it is clear to go. CSGO, you can play it at minimum. Fortnite, you can play it at recommended or minimum. Now, here's the interesting thing. I know a lot of people love the Red Dead Redemption 2. You can play it only on the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. Now, she don't play this game because I called out her 9 games and I did the system performance on the 9 games using the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti or the Radeon RX 550 Ti. So when she gets ready for me to build her system, which is soon, I have a good idea of what to put her on, which is not easy because she only played 9 games and she happy with it. So I want to thank y'all for watching this video. I'll be putting all the descriptions all the links in the descriptions below. And peace. Y'all take it easy.